Welcome to Infinite Progress. This is Landon. Hey, let's get into this. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this installment of Infinite Progress. And what we're going to get into today is a subject that we haven't really gotten into in a while. I was a guest on Negation of P, my buddy Ned's Google Hangout, where we talked about the political arena a little bit during the primary season. So this has been almost a couple years ago. If you look down on our YouTube channel at some of the uploads, I had debated Dustin Chalker, who's one of the co-founders of the Mobile Atheist community, where we did a discussion pertaining to politics in general, in terms of how worldview shapes one's political views and how those political views get carried out in sort of legislation and anything that has to do with kind of moral or ethical norms that would sort of bubble up within that particular perspective. But today we want to respond to kind of some of the, I guess, media outlets, the way that they've been portraying the presumed interaction and relationship between President Trump and what's been called evangelicals. Now, what's very difficult about that is defining the term evangelical. And for those that have maybe a non-theistic or even a completely different worldview than one that is that would consider themselves Christian, evangelical has been kind of a nebulous term for the last 20 or 30 years. It's been very difficult to define. It doesn't fit under the same parameters as some of your ecclesiastical faiths, be that Roman Catholic, one of the Eastern Orthodox branches, confessional Lutheranism, some of your Reformed confessions. And it's certainly not what has been called the Five Sisters of Liberalism or mainline Protestant denominations, be that your United Methodist, United Church of Christ, Episcopalian, the ELCAs, the PCUSAs. And if you wanted to kind of smuggle in the American Baptist and your Universal Unitarians, it's not really associated with that. Evangelicalism has been sort of an outbirth of what was the fundamentalist sort of segregation in the early 20th century. Really, since the time of Carl F. H. Henry, I don't think there's really been kind of a galvanizing thing to hold evangelicalism together. So that very term in and of itself can be problematic. But generally speaking, that term has kind of pasted any form of Christianity that has not been one of those ecclesiastical forms or mainline Protestantism that has taken a more liberal slant over the last century. So this interaction has been very controversial from the get-go. If you remember, during the primary season, Trump kind of backed into the nomination. There was states that he had won where he didn't even win the majority of the votes. He was winning states with, high teens, low 20s in the percentage because of this division. There wasn't this broad sweeping support of President Trump coming into it. In fact, I think if you was to press in on that poll, what we're going to be referring to is a Salon article that talks about the hypocrisy of Christianity or modern day evangelicalism support of President Trump. And part of that is they claim that 80% of white evangelicals support Trump. Now, obviously, with any discussion, it goes into defining terms. So what does it mean to support Trump? What all is entailed in that? And also, what does it mean to be, white evangelical, so to speak? And I think, and Terry Mattingly at getreligion.org, I had sent him a link of this article to just sort of get his general feedback. And his response was, and again, Terry Mattingly, who's been a professor of journalism for 30 years, he teaches at the King's College. He's founder of getreligion.org. I highly recommend that website as it kind of looks at journalism and how journalism treats the field of religion in general. And he's noted that mainstream journalism has not had a good handle on modern evangelicalism and conservative Christian faith for some time. There's a lot of things that they just simply don't understand about it. And, for example, a lot of those polls that say, such and such percent of evangelicals support Donald Trump. Well, if you push back behind the layers, it's actually, especially coming up through the primaries, if an individual attended church more than once a week, the approval rate of Donald Trump from the primaries on up was significantly lower. That when you look at the support for Donald Trump after he already won the nomination, it's pretty safe to say that 50% of those that voted for him was a negative vote toward Hillary, more than it was a positive vote for Trump. So a lot of times, confusion in this language, lines get blurred. But what we want to try to do today is sort of sift this thing out, that we've been charged, those of us who have a Christian worldview that is not of those ecclesiastical forms, have been accused of hypocrisy because of our support of Trump, if we support Trump. And again, what does it mean to support Trump? So we want to get a non-Christian worldview to kind of speak to this from the outside that can maybe look at this and think, yeah, there's something confusing that's going on here. I don't understand in light of the recent controversy with Donald Trump and this adult film star, Stormy Daniels. How could this interaction take place and still garner a type of Christian support? Our reference points is going to be the article posted by Salon.com and the interview from Inside Edition with the actress herself. So kind of with those two hinge points to show that it seems as though something has happened. And even if this particular event doesn't have substantial ground, certainly President Trump has made enough of a statement in the past to garner questioning about his moral character in terms of marriage fidelity and, holding the sacredness to marriage, if you will. He's had a very braggadocious kind of personality toward womanizing over the years. And it doesn't seem as though he's had any kind of contrition over those actions, at least none that's been publicly recorded that we know of. But we'll see where the dialogue takes us. So we have with us Christopher Mowdy, who's been with us before. Christopher, if you would, in case people are just clicking on this for the very first time, they saw on the headline Christians and Trump and wanted to click this and they're not aware of what you do, go ahead and share with us your particular worldview, and please talk about your YouTube channel, if you would, buddy, and give just an initial reaction to this.
Hello, check 1 2. My name's Chris Mowdy, and I am the master of the universe. I am the reptilian overlord. No. So my name's Chris, and I am. If I were to label myself, my favorite phrase is, on a good day, I'm an apatheist when it comes to the great debate question, the great question of whether or not there's a God. And on a bad day, I'm an atheist. But I'm not an atheist for logical, philosophical reasons. So that's where I am in those areas. And as an atheist, as a secularist, as a humanist, I am a liberal. So I have an obvious take on Trump. And the article that you gave as homework, which I took as homework, and kind of took some notes on and stuff, it is horribly written. The author definitely has an agenda, but I just want to make sure that I understand, because my reading of the article is that the hypocrisy that the author sees has to do with any claims of moral high ground, right? And connecting yourself or making claims of moral high ground, yet connecting yourself with people who can't follow through on the moral high ground that you hold yourself and others to for political reasons, right? It's optics. I think it has to do with optics. That's where the hypocrisy comes in. It's like putting the case before the court of common appeals, you know what I mean? Or public appeals. And it's just like, oh, that doesn't sound right. So they're trying to get that kind of emotional reaction, like, oh, look at this hypocrisy. Isn't this horrible? I told you Christians were bad. If that was their goal, this would be an easy way to do it. I can't tell whether this particular author has that agenda. She has other agendas having to do with hatred of women, misogyny, and hatred of the LGBTQ community. So
Okay. Now, in general, Chris, as a secular and as a secularist and a liberal, if there is that sort of continued support for Trump, would you agree? Is your general take, as someone who doesn't share the Christian worldview, do you look at that connection with kind of confusion, or do you question it as well? Would you say it is a hypocrisy if such a connection exists in general?
What do you mean by support?
Yeah, see, and that is what makes this difficult. Is it seems
that's what we're here to define, and we're going to discuss. And I think that's going to be the crux of the matter. Is we are going to have to dig down in that into the dirt.
So if we are going to use the article as any kind of foundation for trying to answer that question, there is a bit in there. The president has surrounded himself with evangelicals and pledged to do differently. These are the words of Tony Perkins. And that Trump would have the allegiance of the religious right as long as he continues to be the most pro-life, pro-family president and continues to walk the straight and narrow with the right influence, right? So if that allegiance of this, how do I put this? The religious right, I guess, is a movement that has with it fundraising capacities and PACs and super PACs and stuff like that for the purpose of, influencing political campaigns. And they do it legally and, as I understand, legitimately. But if they're going to form an alliance and an allegiance, and that's considered support, claim the moral high ground and have an alliance or allegiance with somebody who doesn't demonstrate the moral high ground that they preach, then that does look hypocritical.
Fair enough.
I think that's the strongest thing that can be said.
Yeah, no, that's good. That clears it up. And you just reminded me, I meant to mention earlier for our audience, if you don't listen to him, Dr. Albert Mohler has a podcast that he puts out called The Briefing, and he actually talked about this on Friday's podcast. It was either Thursday or Friday. I think it was yesterday. But if you go to his website, almohler.com, you can look it up. They have the written transcript, or you can listen to the audio. And he spoke of this. He spoke of garnering support for a president who has seemingly, not seemingly, who has legislatively done things that have been positive and beneficial for those that carry a Christian consciousness about them, but yet, acts in a particular immoral behavior, in this case, infidelity in terms of his marriage, and trying to cover it up, that there is a duty-bound obligation to call sin sin. And Dr. Russell Moore of the Religious and Liberties, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, has taken a lot of heat because of his outspoken criticism of Trump, his moral behavior, the language that he's used. I certainly commend him for standing on principle and taking the heat that he has from SBC and other evangelical leaders who simply want to show unity, and it seems even at the expense of a moral high ground. So you're certainly not alone, Christopher, in the analysis of this. And that's one thing in this article. Obviously, it's not a fact-driven piece. It has, more opinion driven behind it. But I did want to use this to address the issue of hypocrisy. We certainly consider ourselves here something of a think tank that, we want to exchange these ideas with different worldviews. And we just heard Mr. Philip Campbell step in. It's a sort of segue over to you, buddy. And if you would sort of share your personal worldview, and if you would like your political affiliation, and talk about what you do. You're kind of the man running the switchboard for this whole operation, so you're doing some dual tasking here. But go ahead and share with the audience your general take on this story, and is it even possible for a Christian to support in some way President Trump?
All right, first off, let me say thanks, Chris and Landon. I love to have awesome conversations and with awesome people. So, I'm Phil Campbell. Own an IT company as well as a production company, and I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian, and but I'm also a man of reason and logic. So I enter everything with reason and logic. Now, there would be those that would argue, how can you believe in the Bible, say you're a man of reason and logic? Well, that's a debate for another time. But that's kind of where I'm at, and that's who I am in a nutshell. I'm a musician as well, just like Chris over there. So we got that kindred brotherhood going on there. So, but yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Let's throw open the gates and let's roll.
Well, if you would, go ahead and give your take on the story in general. Sort of fill in as a Christian. What's your general response to the accusations? You can say whether you believe them or not.
Okay. All right.
I think based off of the interview and the nature of the case, it's one of those things we'll never know, because if she was paid to be quiet, she was paid to be quiet. Like, she's never going to say whether she did. Now, in the inside interview, what she did not do was deny it. She didn't affirm it, but she did not deny that such an event took place. So okay. I'm of the conviction that there's enough smoke there that it probably did happen.
Okay.
But that's not, even if there wasn't that, there's enough in his past in terms of how he's spoken about women that is incredibly disturbing. It doesn't mean I'm not thrilled that he was the first president to, take part in the March for Life last week.
Let me
things of that nature. So yeah, that's what I'm coming to you.
Let me jump in here.
Go ahead. Get on it.
My grandpa told me a story a long time ago, and it stuck with me. I'm basically the only Republican in my family. All my family's Democrats, and I would love to hash it out with my grandpa. He was an old Korean War vet, and we just loved to go at it, and it was awesome. But he told me something. He said, "Son, let me tell you something." He said, "This is the way I look at politics and the presidency." He said, "If I need my grass mowed, and there's two people here to mow my grass, one of them happens to be a Christian, one of them happens not to be a Christian, I'm going to hire the man that I think is going to mow my lawn the best." And that's how I approach it. And so that's that. I'm not here to defend Trump. I don't defend men. Men stand on their own. They answer for their own. That's that. However, I am here to, kind of get in the weeds on this about how can somebody who professes Christ vote for a guy like Trump. I mean, to me it's simple, but we'll get into that. So that's the article's a hit piece. I can systematically go through this thing and just point out blatant bias. It's just a hit job. So that's that. But we can get to the higher level topic of, the hypocrisy or perceived hypocrisy. Which is
so just real quick before I go back to Christopher, real quick, is what's your general response to somebody that accuses you, who professes Christian, and your support of Trump? Even if that means defining your terms, what do you mean by support? Go ahead and sort of lay that groundwork out there then. What does it mean to support Trump? Okay, you just said you basically hired him to, quote, cut your grass kind of thing.
Yep.
If this public figure whom you have selected to do a certain chore for you,
mm-hmm.
Is he doing it to your satisfaction? And are you saying an event like this doesn't hinder your support of him one way or another? And again, probably define support.
No, I'm a sinner saved by grace. I would use the same analogy. Maudy's a great bass player. We don't share the same worldview. However, if there's a job to be done, we will get the job done, and we will accomplish the task. I will engage with Maudy as I do everybody, and talk to him as a human, and try to love him the best I know how. And we got a job to do. If I have a band and I need a bass player and there's money, and I'm like, "Hey, Maudy, you're the best around. I want the best." I bring him on to do a job. I mean, it's it really is that. I mean, again, it's pragmatic in my head. Donald Trump's not my spiritual advisor. He's not my moral authority. I have one moral authority, one, quote unquote spiritual advisor, the Brotherhood and all that. They're advisors in their own right, but I'm speaking of the Holy Scriptures as the advisor. So I don't follow man. So yeah, I mean that.
You're leaving out the main detail that
Go ahead.
after you hired me for the gig and we actually played it, we would have destroyed the house.
That's right, son. What up?
So left that little detail out.
That's true. That was now the little detail. That's a big detail.
Yes, it would have been a face melting experience.
Melting.
All right, Christopher, general reaction to that. The Christian has defended his, if you will, support in his terms of Trump.
I think that is legitimate. I'm taking notes and I'm preparing, I'm trying to compartmentalize the way that the conversation is going so that I'm not only following it, but, I can keep up and ask questions that make sense and stuff like that, right? So I knew that you were going to ask the question to Phil that you did. And as he's answering it, I literally wrote down, what is the difference between the importance of your president representing your ideals as a person versus a policymaker? Right? Because his job as a politician is to push policy.
That's right.
And if he's pushing the policy that you want and he's doing it well, it's not only content but style, right?
I don't really style. You don't get points for style. There's no style points.
Oh, but if you play dirty, you get points subtracted. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
in general, right?
Okay.
All things being equal. All things being equal.
Okay, I'll relent.
How about that? Charitability makes a difference, right, to some. And it has nothing to do with Christianity or morality or shit like that there. It's the, it is the golden rule, and I'm sure that we can...
Yeah, I mean,
that exists in the Bible and the origins of that. That's a whole other conversation. Right?
You hope everybody's a good dude,
Exactly.
I mean, and I don't think he's done anything from a nefarious standpoint as far as policy's concerned. I'm not here to defend Trump. I didn't defend George Bush. I wouldn't defend anybody. I mean,
you talking about George W?
Yeah. They stand on their own. They stand, as a man does man things. I'll even go out this far and say, President Clinton, the uproar over what he did in the Oval Office, although I think it was a disrespect to the office in the sense of actually violating the office, literally doing things of that manner in that professional environment. However, it did not, I don't believe it hindered his ability to execute the office. What got him in trouble was lying, So, I mean, whatever, you toss that up how you want. I look at things.
It depends on your definition of is.
Is what is. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not. Look, there's you got to be a narcissistic, high-minded, self-absorbed, grandiose megalomaniac to run for president anyway.
You're right. That's a very self-selected group of jerks.
There you go. So look, if we got these guys to pick from,
well, now hold on. I kind of want to pump the brakes on you guys a little bit on there.
Ahead.
Maybe it takes that type of person to possibly win, but for the life of me, I don't think that Rick Santorum or Ben Carson was these over the top. Even Bobby Jindal were these massively egomaniacs to that degree. Now, did they have a certain aspect of confidence? Did they believe in what they were doing? That's not the same kind of ego that I find in Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form.
No, but
I would make a distinction there that there is a difference between confidence and this sort of level of untouchable type of arrogance that seems to flow from Trump. I mean, not, even Vice President Pence.
I think that's a difference that doesn't make a difference. That's a distinction that doesn't make a difference, right? Ego comes in a bunch of different flavors. It's not binary. Like, ego means this one negative thing, has these negative connotations, whereas confidence is this other thing. No, it's much messier than that. And anyone who wants to run for an office where their opinion rules a nation has some things going on in the background that really think that he is or she is a person, that has opinions that are worth other people following. That is narcissistic by definition. That is a self-absorbed position to have, to then run on a platform, and then if you win, get the job, do everything that the job entails. It's like, to volunteer for that is just like ruler of the world.
I would say on that one though, Christopher, you have so truncated the term narcissism. I mean, almost by definition, you've excluded the idea that, okay, truth exists. That if anybody says truth exists, that they're automatically narcissistic. To claim that you have a certain belief in policies, let's say that there are views or policies that have existed for a long period of time. Obviously there are new challenges in terms of possibly military threats or economics that come up. But
let me interject something.
I don't know if too many people think that what they're doing is completely unique, that they're the only one that can fix it, but they certainly believe or have confidence that the views that are behind them, and the reason that they're running is because other people are telling them that those views are correct.
Let me interject something.
So, go ahead.
You're assuming that all those terms I laid out are negative.
Me?
No, I'm just saying the common perception is that all those terms I put out there are negative. That they're just terms, they're just words. I've known a lot of good guys who are narcissistic. I've been called full of myself,
I can understand. I can understand being bad and not being bad like a particular way. Right? Like I get what you're saying. And I think, Christopher, that's where I would sort of accept what you're saying is that there could be tiers, that there could be blurring in terms of where does assurance and confidence turn into that vice we call pride. Where is that line of distinction? And that could vary from person to person. I would grant you that. I really would. But I do think that, again, to take the personality of Trump over and against some of those other candidates I mentioned, I really do think that there is a difference just in them and how they present themselves in terms of what it is that they desire to accomplish. Do you get from?
I agree.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
I agree with that. But I think that the only distinction, the only point that I was making is everyone on the stage, when there was like 14, 17 of them for the debates, they all. And keep in mind, the population, like what is it, over 320 million now?
Like close to 370, 360, 365, somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
So 17 out of 360,000 people are on, like, these are the most narcissistic people in the nation, right? Because if you think that you have the power of persuasion or ideas that are persuasive enough to win over 17 people. I mean, that's just like, I just think that it plays out in many different ways, right? For Trump, it's this weird bravado that is this like New York slick spray tan, braggadocio bravado thing, right? That's how it manifests for him, but it's still the same narcissism, in my opinion, as a Rick Santorum who feels he's standing on a moral high ground.
Or Bernie Sanders.
Or Bernie Sanders. Oh, absolutely. I was only going with the Republican side.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it knows no bounds.
Oh yeah, forget it. Politicians in general, they're all full of crap. They're all full of crap and they're narcissistic. Anyone running for politics, yes. I think that's a narcissistic trip. I would love to think that it's because people are community builders and blah, 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 blah. But things have gotten so like the minutia of running being a community leader towards going into politics has been so played out that is a script that people use now. You know what I mean?
I just feel like that kind of pessimism, because there's other politicians that I like, I think sometimes
It is pessimistic. I will grant you that. That is, I have a pessimistic view of it.
because there are a lot of guys that I just bought Ben Sasta's book on the vanishing American adult, and knowing his background, his schooling, I think just because the term narcissism has such a negative aspect to it.
Again,
I really do think it is careful to.
We're defining these terms. We're defining these terms. I'm not going to let somebody else define a term for me in a conversation I'm having, right? So I'm defining it. I don't see it as an inherently negative thing, right? I just looked up the definition of a megalomaniac, right? A mania for great or grandiose performance. I would say running the free world
is megalomaniacal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it. I'm not trying to be a spin doctor, but I'm just trying to say there's a certain caliber of individual that would even want to do that job.
So there is no possible category to which, and I guess this is more directed at you, Christopher, that you could not conceive of an individual looking at what they see as certain things that are hindering general freedom and well-being for their neighbor who served this country, and out of a compassion for their neighbor, wanting to serve in a high office and try to have the ability to make influence and get legislation that they think is better for them, which then spreads out into other areas that nobody can do that with any kind of attempt. I'm not saying achieve the goal, right? Like in order to get to president, we know that the financial, entanglements that it takes to get there. But I'm just saying in general, the general person who desires to think that, I really want to make a difference. I really want to, let's just take a very controversial, if somebody is convinced that abortion is murdering babies and they think, I really want to save those babies' lives, so I want to try to get in and fight for legislation to do that. I mean, is there a place that you would categorize that person that said, or do you think even to have that, like that must be narcissistic to even want to do that?
I think that there's a difference between activism, right? And activism as a stepping stone towards political endeavors, right? Like, I think that genuinely wanting to cause the right kind of change, right? Being the change that you want to see. I think that exists probably at the more local level, like people who run for council or, over a smaller group of people where they may know most of them by name. You know what I mean? I think that genuinely wanting to help and do your civic duty, that attitude might be more prominent at that level. I think that once you get the higher up level you go, I think that Phil said it best, it takes a certain kind of animal, right? It takes a certain caliber of person, certain caliber of attitude to do that.
And before I go to you, Phil, let me get one more quick question on Christopher. Do you think that then these senators or representatives, whether it be Langford of Oklahoma, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, that those individuals that profess a Christian faith and that they're acting in accordance to that worldview, do you think that whole endeavor is hypocritical, that it's disingenuous, or do you just give your general take on that as someone who's secular and liberal and sees someone who professes a Christian worldview and operates in a more conservative political party? Do you agree with the Salon hit piece that it is a plea for power, or do you think they have moral reasons for doing what they're doing, just in general?
I'm still not clear about what your question is, because I thought I understood, but when you refer to the Salon piece, it makes me think that it's related to Trump. So, I mean, are you saying running for office?
Do you take at face value a genuineness to these politicians that reach the level of senator, even representative, who proclaim a Christian worldview?
Okay.
Or do you think that, and the only reason I referred to the Salon piece is because of her comment in that piece that said she used to think that individuals of the moral majority had an altruistic motivation, but then she said, I no longer think it's that, I think it's a power play. Do you think that Ben Sasse and Langford, and even if it's Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, that these guys, if they have a particular religious worldview profession that it's a power play, or do you think that it's a genuine bubbling up from a worldview to, again, serve their neighbor for their good, that it comes out of that it is a moral or an ethical reason to do that? What's your general take on that overall? And then the next level would be getting into the Trump thing. Did that help clarify a little bit?
A little bit, but I think that there's some confusion that I kind of wanted. So what I think you want from me as an answer is to the question: is it a power play for politicians to run on the platform of their Christian faith?
Yep.
Right. That seems to be the question you want me to answer, and I'll happily answer that. But I do want to correct what I think is a misunderstanding. Is in the article, the author was specifically connecting the moral majority claiming to be moral and connecting themselves to Trump, not because of moral behaviors, but because he is the plumber that Philip was talking about, getting through the policy that they want to get through. That's the power play that I think the author was referring to in the piece when she used that term. Regardless, we can have a separate discussion about that. To answer the question that you want me to answer, I have no problem if I expect it. I expect people who run for office to represent the ideologies, the myths, the culture, the beliefs, the social constructions and handed down conventions of their areas. And, the House of Representatives kind of more representing what is going on, because there's more depending on the population of the state. And, so you can really get a better sampling, a higher resolution sampling of the different ideas, the diversity of ideas in each state, right? So I expect some people to run on Christian values or whatever values they have. There are some complete wackadoos in the House of Representatives. So.
All right. Now, Philip, to you, I guess taking that comment as you've expressed, where is the line for you in terms of proper ethical behavior? One example I can think of is, let's take your two lawnmower guys, and let's say that I know that, and this is just for the sake of argument for those in the listening audience, and particularly for you, Christopher, I'm not saying this is the standard. I'm not saying that non-Christian people are automatically more wicked or evil or whatever. Okay, this is just for an analogy. But let's just say that between those two guys, that the non-Christian dude has been has a history of theft, but he hasn't quite been caught by the cops. And he cuts grass better than anybody, but you do have a little bit of worry in the back of your mind that he's really just scoping your place out to one day rob you. Whereas this other fella who you go to church with, his character, he's been faithfully married, these kind of character traits that even though it's a part of his personal life, it still kind of reflects out in his character.
I know where you're going.
This is for the benefit of the audience. I'm just
okay. All right.
Cashing this out for the audience that that his character is good, that, I trust him more to come on my yard and cut the grass, even though I don't think he can quite do as good a job, but I feel better for those ethical reasons. Now let's shift this to the platform of presidency, that I may be sort of pleased with some of the results that I might be getting from his policies. However, have I given over too much? Where do I get the room, as some of these, like Langford and Ben Sasse have done, have called out Trump on some of his behavior without getting pushback from within the party that says, hey, we got to show unity here. You can't do that.
Okay.
You can't show that kind of thing. So give your general response to that. Where do you draw the line? At what point does ethics matter?
Let me recharacterize your analogy. This is a better analogy, okay? And here it is. There's two people. Neither one of them are believers. They both have moral issues. And so to me, it just comes down to the substance of the issues that I believe in. My team, your team, what I believe, what you believe. as far as policy. I'm a free market guy. I believe in low taxes. I believe the government should be smaller, not bigger. I mean, go down the list. I am pro-life. I am, just go down the conservative platform. There's a few things that I disagree with, corporate welfare, things of that nature, when you really want to get into the weeds of policy and things of that nature. I don't want to get super wonky, but for the most part, on a general level, I think that's a better analogy. You have two people that are both, just whatever. I mean, I didn't have the choice, nor have I ever had the choice of selecting a person who was an upright, standing, godly man in a presidential election. I've never had that. So when I'm faced with a choice, it's really pragmatic to me. This one says he's for what I'm for, because I don't know. I just assume everybody's a liar. And this is where, I am, and just the way I am. I don't outrightly trust anyone. I want to give.
You call me a pessimist.
Well, I'm a realist. I'm just being honest. Here's my Christian beliefs. We're all fallen. We're all born into sin. We're all sinners. I fail every day. I'm not perfect. I know if me trying and I fail, the guy who's not trying, well, I mean, let's just, just the logical conclusion to that is it is what it is. So I think that's a better analogy. I've never had the opportunity to vote for a God-fearing, Bible-believing Christian. And when I did support Ben Carson, I sent him money because I thought, man, if anybody deserves to be in there, it's a brain surgeon. If he can't dissect these policies and get down and do all this. And I thought he was a good moral dude from what I knew of him. I know only what I can read and what I can find about him because I don't know him personally. And I've always liked Ted Cruz because his political views are a lot more in line with me, small government, things of that nature, conservative. And I do believe he is a Christian. And I like Ted. But that's not the question. The general election was Trump or Hillary. And then it just comes down to policy for me. Because I can't control anybody, and I don't see that I'm surrendering anything to anyone. You're fighting for what you're fighting for. I'm fighting for what I'm fighting for. I mean, it's simple. It's, my brother always accuses me of being a black and white guy and saying the world's full of gray. Sure, it is. But on some things, it's not. So, I mean, that's just how I see it. Call me simple, call me whatever you want. I mean, it is what it is. You can either, like Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. There's a lot of truth in that. Either do it or don't do it, Mean what you say what you mean. There's an old term, piss or get off the pot.
Now, Christopher, unless you had a specific follow-up to that, I wanted to ask you, do you think, from what your observation is, do you think that one who claims a Christian worldview ought to be more in line with what's called conservative or Republican Party or the more liberal Democrat Party?
It makes sense if I understand the philosophical underpinnings of Christianity and conservatism, contemporary conservatism, modern conservatism. It makes sense that a Christian ideology is inherently conservative as compared to liberal, right? How liberal is used. And for the liberal versions of Christianity, they seem to be bending over backwards to interpret scripture to be so inclusive that it's almost unrecognizable. But, that doesn't bother me. That's just, just an observation. So, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that do you know of any secular or non-theistic individuals that support Trump in that sense, that they share, political policies and whatnot with them? Are they bothered by something like, let's say, this sexual scandal or not? Or, what would be your take as, what is the moral compass for you, for example? Would it bother you if you were a supporter of Bernie Sanders and you found out he did something like this? Would you stop supporting him at that point? Or, let's just take what's his name from Minnesota, that happened? Do you think that he should have been removed from office, or do you think no, that shouldn't have kept him from office?
Senator Al Franken.
Yeah, Al Franken. Thank you. Just give your general take on that. Do you find that embarrassing, shameful, whatever? Or do you think it shouldn't have got him out of office?
So I don't know a lot of atheists, secularists, liberals that agree with Trump policies or Trump's process of talking, tweeting, communicating, not communicating, whatever, hiring, firing. Because I live on the East Coast. I work in Philadelphia. A lot of the people that I work with are super liberal. I'm a manager for a laboratory, so I work in a science center. Many scientists are liberal. Very few are conservative. So that was the first question that you asked. Do I know anyone who agrees with Trump policies that is, atheist, liberal, blah, blah, blah? No. As far as Al Franken, I think, I don't necessarily have a huge opinion about it, other than if many people are coming forward and you have to make a decision. So he chose to step down. I honestly think that he was being used as a not necessarily a pawn, but a scapegoat, so that certain people in the Democratic Party can say, do you see what we do? Do you see what Democrats do when they are accused of things? We step down.
The moral high ground.
Exactly. Shouldn't you do the same? Where's the reciprocity? We're showing you how we want to be treated. This is the golden rule. Now it's your turn. Right? That's kind of, I think a little bit of that was going on there. But I do like Al Franken, but I mean, I am not a political ethics scholar in any way, shape, or form. So should he have? I don't know.
Oh, you don't know? I was just going to ask you, where's the line for you then? What is kind of that moral compass? Where does the private life of an individual or activity or actions, again, let's just say that he's pushing through all the policies that you love. Mm-hmm. At what point does his ethical and moral behavior sort of trip you to where you say, I don't like what he's doing. I don't support him, or I want to voice opposition to him on these points, that either he stepped down or I'm going to vote for somebody else. Do you have a line? Could you describe it at all?
Probably. I'd have to take it on a case-by-case basis. I don't have a general rule. I haven't thought about it to the point where I have a general rule where I can just say, oh, well, if this happened, then blah, blah, blah. I mean, of course, the most egregious things. If it was found out that he was, cloning children to stay 4 years old, and he had a colony of them in his basement and was abusing them for decades. You know what I mean? Take the most heinous and my wife liked that one. And take the most heinous and egregious scenario. Yes, if I found out that somebody that I liked was pushing policy that I was pushing policy that I liked, if I found that out, it wouldn't matter that they were pushing policy that I liked. I would want them to suffer horribly.
Touche.
So that being said, obviously it's on a continuum. I think that retributive justice being what it is, that the severity of the punishment should absolutely reflect the severity of the crime, right? So, pedophilia or rape or molestation or assault, all of those things that are in their own category as compared to, I don't know, things that are lesser. And I can't even think of something that is lesser.
Breaking and entering without hurting somebody.
Exactly.
Drinking and driving.
DUIs. Yeah. So I think that it goes. It's on a continuum. It would have to be a very specific.
That's fair. That's definitely. Yeah, that's definitely fair. The atheist I referenced earlier that I debated, Dustin Chalker, is kind of an avid libertarian. So I know of at least one and several atheists that are finding more of a home in the Libertarian Party that agree on certain policies that Philip mentioned earlier in terms of small government and states' rights and those kind of things, but socially are a little more lenient, more socially liberal in their things, and are finding more of a home in the Libertarian Party. And that's what I thought was interesting. Here was a guy that was an atheist that was advocating the basically the abolishment of public schools as an atheist. He homeschooled his own kids. He just felt like public schools are disasters and didn't want the government controlling education. So for the listening audience, I encourage you to watch that debate if that sounds foreign to you. He was,
But depending on where you live, public education may very well be a horror show. I mean, even if
I just thought that was very interesting. I love the diversity even within atheism. It's not this monolithic where, for those that may be a Christian audience watching this, you think, oh well, yeah, of course, Christopher's liberal. He's not theistic. Well, that's not always the case. There are, and even if he doesn't know any personally, that would be supporting of Trump. That they are there. Now, Philip, on your end, do you find anywhere that somebody can have a Christian worldview and be an advocate or a supporter of the Democratic or the liberal political position?
Not the modern Democratic Party. No. I'll give you an example. My grandmother's staunch Catholic, and my mom is a professing Christian, and both Democrats. And let's just say holidays and things of that nature, they all don't want me talking politics because I have a firm opinion about, I don't see how you could be for, especially a Catholic, could vote Democrat and their platform be pro-choice. And pro-choice is just, soften it up, but let's call a spade a spade. It's murder. It is. Yeah. My dad gave me, here was my dad's sex talk to me. Son, you better wrap it up because I ain't taking care of a kid for you. That was it. It was simple. Be responsible. Don't be a knucklehead. And I wasn't a Christian at this time. I was, partying, drugging, doing all the bits. And I got the message. You know what I mean? You that was never an option in my family. It wasn't talking about abortion. It was like, it just wasn't even there. It's just not, it's unconscionable. You know what I mean? And I know I have friends who've had abortions, and I've told them my opinion. You don't understand. I'm like, well, man, look, be responsible. When I was irresponsible and I was drinking and driving, I didn't cry when I got in trouble. I paid my debt to society, took my licks. I broke the rules. I manned up, and I took responsibility for my actions. I mean, it's a cop-out. It's murder. It's a cop-out. I have all kinds of strong opinions about it. But I've spoken to several women who've had an abortion and then later had children who aren't Christians, and they told me, the trauma that they had in their soul, that I can't even put it into words, man. The fact that they had a kid after that, it was almost like they lived with guilt forever, and it just it's a disaster. And sometimes you do have to save people from themselves. You do have to have boundaries. I do believe in small government, but the fact that this is even a question, can I kill the kid or not? I'm pretty sure if I pulled my .38 out and shot somebody, I'd be a murderer. It's simple to me. Again, I'm a black and white guy. You know what I mean? It's right or wrong. It is what it is. The nuances and all that and everything else. Whatever. That's my opinion, and I don't apologize for my opinion. So.
Well, then let me ask you the same thing I asked Christopher. Do you think that someone who's secular, atheistic, non-theistic, as a worldview, do you think they could be a conservative or a Republican, support Trump, or a libertarian or what have you. Do you think that could happen?
Yeah, because the conservative platform is based on kind of market. It's about smaller government, less taxes. Again, not I'm just doing high level stuff here. You know, national defense. I mean, nobody in this country, whether Democrat or Republican, wants freaking missiles lobbed at them. You know, yeah, I think somebody who doesn't believe in God can be a Republican for sure. I'm sure several of Peter Thiel, he's a gay man, spoke at the RNC National Convention. He's a billionaire, but he happens to be an openly gay man. So, I mean, you know, and the platform, you know, of the Republicans is traditional marriage. But, again, you got that balance in the conservative party. It's a big enough party to where, you know, there is a libertarian wing. And even the socially conservative wing of it. Here was my thing. When gay marriage was up on the ballot, I loved the way it was presented in 2004. My state, the state I live in, we voted against it. Now, Vermont voted for it. I think I can't remember, but I know Vermont right off the top of my head. And I was perfectly fine with that because the people in the state of Ohio had a voice. We had a say in that. Now, granted, certain things need to be regulated at the federal level. Immigration's a big hot topic right now. Well, controlling the borders is a constitutional responsibility of the federal government. So, but the nuances of things of that nature, you know, if I loathe abortion, but if Vermont voted to have that and Ohio didn't, I think that goes back to a republic. You know, Thomas Jefferson said, you know, these states united. And I think there's a lot to be said about that statement. These states united. I mean, that's how I view it. I believe every state, because it isn't one size fits all. You know, I can go on and on. But, you know, I know many people who don't share my conservative values that believe in the conservative principles of free market, low taxes, small government, things of that nature. There's more room for them in our party than there is for a guy like me in the Democrat Party. That's my opinion.
Yeah, now, Christopher, you respond to that. I noticed both of you seem to give the analysis that there's not it would seem inconsistent for conservative Christianity, even as you know it, Christopher, to associate with a liberal Democratic Party platform. But there seems to be enough room in the conservative wing for one who has a secular worldview. Would you say you agree with that assessment there?
I don't know if I necessarily said that I could see a conservative Christian being liberal, because that would kind of be against the whole conservative Christian thing.
No. I was saying you did agree with that. I was saying that both of you seem to agree that if somebody takes their Christian worldview and, you know, it's a confessional conservative in the sense of, you know, they take the Bible as an authoritative text and, you know, that kind of thing. I don't want to say take their faith seriously, because I don't want to marginalize, you know, other liberal Christian denominations, but these are the terms that are thrown within the religious context. Both of you seem to indicate that someone who's a conservative Christian would not be able to operate in a democratic liberal platform, but Philip seemed to indicate that there's room in the Republican platform for someone who's secular or non-theistic. Why do you think that is? Do you think that the Democratic Party ought to change to be more inclusive of that? What policies do you think you guys could change that would be more accommodating to those that maybe have or do you even want that? Do you just want atheism to grow and grow and eventually squash out conservative Christian thought?
So there were several questions in there.
Yeah, I definitely piled them on, but I hope they kind of fed one into the other to kind of give you layers to get at if you wanted to.
Well, so my atheism I couldn't say that my atheism necessarily contributes to my political philosophy, right? My secular humanism, on the other hand, does, or what bits of my philosophy I get from secular humanism certainly does contribute to my political philosophy. So, just for that clarification, I am a religious pluralist, so I think that it is inevitable that a nation as big as the United States is going to have different religious affiliations, and I think that's totally fine, and that should be represented in people who push policy, and they should be able to vote. And if they're a majority, they're a majority. If they're a minority, they're a minority, right? What else? As far as my explanation for why one person could fit in one group and another person could not fit in another group would be just that's how distributions work. In the bell curve, it's not like a majority of conservatives are liberal. It's just that on one of the tail ends of a bell curve that represents just how conservative you are, on one end of the bell curve, some people are a very liberal version of what a conservative is, right? And that liberalism might be looked at as moderate or even just liberal by liberal standards as well, right? Vice versa might happen on the liberal side of things, but on the other end of the liberal bell curve, well, I guess that analogy doesn't necessarily hold for that, but for the conservative Christian, I couldn't imagine. Yeah. I'm sure that there are individuals that self-label as conservative Christian that have liberal democratic underpinnings, right? Like most Catholics, but that's not conservative. That's not conservative Christians, right? But they do think that their liberalism. Hold on a second. They do think that their liberalism sincerely is based in their religion and their understanding. So I can see how religious people could be liberal, but like Calvinists or evangelical or fundamentalists, it just seems inherent in their ethical, moral, social fabric, their philosophy, and all that they would want things to be more conservative. They don't want things to be super duper progressive so that it gets out of control and people are doing things that they consider are unethical or immoral, or the idea or the boundaries of what is considered unethical or immoral are pushed because people are progressing too quickly in the wrong directions. And I can easily see how it's a hand in glove fit.
Would you want to see? Would you want to see more unity at all there, Christopher, in terms of, like you're talking to two guys that have a different worldview, such as yourself. What are some ways that you think, is there a political party that could house both of us? Or do you think that it has to be this polarizing split and we kind of have to jockey and push back and forth with these power struggles in terms of policies? Do you think if we took more of a libertarian view and got back to states' rights, that all the liberals could just run to the coast and set up shop, all the conservatives can wad up in the middle, and we'd all just be happy? Or do you think again, would you want to accommodate certain features within the liberal democratic platform that would be more welcoming to conservative Christians at all? No.
I mean, I'm not I have none's control over the Democratic platform, and I'm not even a staunch activist. And this is a point that I want to make on one of the topics we had earlier. Like, I'm not an activist by nature. So my political views are just based on my understandings of things and my observations of things. I am not a team Democrat. I vote Democratic because they, based on how I feel about specific policy, their platform most closely represents how I would want people to vote. It's not a perfect fit, and I can definitely see how there are problems with the Democratic Party. So I am not team Democrat. So I couldn't tell you how to change the platform to include more conservative Christians. I don't think that there should be unity in ideas. I think that the fact that there are different ideas and that they are fought out in policy where people can vote, I think that that's ideal. I think that the thing that we should come together on is having civil discussion about the difference of ideas that we have and being able to argue against ideas without arguing against the people who have the ideas, right?
I second that.
Yeah, I very much expect people to vote in a way that I completely disagree with. I hope that they're in the minority, but if they're not, that is a reality check for me about either who I'm surrounded by or the motivation to get out and vote of the people I'm surrounded by, right? It might be that I'm not really surrounded by that many Republicans. It's just that the Republicans around me are super motivated to get out and vote.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, no, that's fair. And Phil, as we're kind of wrapping up, we've been at this about an hour. I'll go ahead and give you your last shot at how do we reconcile? Do we need liberals? Which I don't think it is. I think it is pretty well grounded statistically that most of your, let's just call it intellectuals and elites on your university campuses, as Christopher said, most of his scientists that he works with are liberal leaning, democratic leaning. Is there something we could do? I don't mean we as if I'm a part of it, but is there something that the Conservative Party could do that could be more accommodating to those that have a worldview? Or what is your sort of suggested solution to this polarizing divide politically? Is it, again, have all the liberals run out to the coasts and just set up shop in their states, all the conservatives move to the middle, and just keep as much federal as small as possible and let the states just govern each other? Do you have, what's your kind of resolution to this at all? Do you just, as Christopher said, you just kind of accept if you're in the minority, hey, we lost this round, maybe we'll get them next time? What's your general take?
Well, a couple things. I wish we were more constitutional as a whole. I do think it would solve a lot of problems for most people, but you're always going to have a squeaky wheel wherever you go. And compromise, by its nature, means everybody loses. So there could be more compromise and more, if there was more rational debate and say, okay, I'm not willing to move on this, you're not willing to move on this, but this right here is in play. What do you got in play? And kind of finagle the deal. I wish we were, states' rights gets a bad rap because of the whole slavery thing, which on record was the Democratic Party. But that aside, I think it makes more sense to me if you have a federal government that takes care of what the federal government was supposed to take care of in the Constitution, Bill of Rights, things of that nature. That's why we have, we can have an amendment, what is it? Is it 2/3 or 3/5? I'd have to look it up. I want to say maybe it's 3/5, 2/3 of the states. Anyway, the states can have a constitutional convention. If the majority of the states come together and say this needs to be, ratified, they put it in the Constitution. I am a states' rights guy. I was pretty angry when my vote in 2004 was nullified, and many of other people in Ohio was nullified. I don't like the government forcing anybody to do anything. Let me put it this way. The government should be there to say no, not to say yes. And what I mean by that is the government, let's talk big business. I am a free market guy, but I love Teddy Roosevelt. I'll give my story. Landon's heard this 100 times. But the story goes like this. It was a really cold winter. The coal miners went on strike because they were getting treated, horribly, and they wanted to unionize. And the robber barons, the titans of industry, whatever you want to call them, weren't budging. And Roosevelt saw this coming on horizon, and he called him in. He called both sides in. He said, boys, look, we need to settle this. And the robber barons, or the titans, or the coal magnates, whatever you want to call them, they wouldn't budge. And he said, well, let me put it to you this way. He said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to take the army and have them go work the mines, and I'll just nationalize the coal mines. Now, granted, the backdrop of this is brutally cold winter. He will have millions of people dying from freezing to death if they can't solve this. So he threatened that. Long story short, they said, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. He said, yeah, I know it is. But he made a play in the sense to say, whose side do you think they're going to be on when it comes down to this? People who want to starve, or they're going to cite the Constitution to protect you so they could all die? And so he intervened. He didn't use military or anything. He got them in a room. They wouldn't negotiate with the miners' union. So he got a guy from the rail union. And he said, I noticed that if I called Tweedledee Tweedledum, things were sorted. So he found a way to work it out. He threatened them. And that's what I mean by saying no. He let them run their course, and they called him the trust buster. He let these guys have free market, but when free market became, detriment to society as a whole, he said, hey, wait a minute. We got to bring this, we got to we got to say no, right? Not the government is your nanny, the government is your paycheck, the government is this, government is that. That's what I mean by that. So I do believe in a more states' rights approach to things, but you're going to have those, and that's what happened with the same-sex marriage thing. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we lost that one. Yeah, it's the law of the land now. Doesn't mean I agree with it, but it's the law of the land. I live in the country. It was decided, so be it. Again, I have my opinions on it, but I don't hate my old lead singer. He's gay. I don't have a problem, because sin is sin is sin. If I have a problem with that, this one or that one or this one, hey, we're all in the same boat and we all need the same answer. So, again, I probably oversimplify everything, but, I do second what Mowdy said about if people could have civil discourse, can agree without being disagreeable, or agree to disagree. My brother, he doesn't share my worldview or my political views or most anything. But we run two businesses together. We find things that we can agree on and things we don't agree on, and we just, we talk it out. And if there's an impasse, we just say, look, it is what it is. But the nation has descended into tribalism, identity politics, instead of ideas. And it's a shame. And I just think that, you're not always going to agree. I mean, even in the Republican Party, we have outliers and stuff and things of that nature, and that's fine. And I believe everybody has a right to their opinion. And, I'm not the one that has a problem talking to somebody who doesn't agree with me.
Yeah.
You'll find more of that intolerance on the left side of the equation than you will the right. Now, there are far-right crazy wackos. You got the fringes on both of them. But the majority of the mainstream of the party believes in free speech. You have a right to tell me to shut up, and I have a right to tell you no. It's just whatever, man. So that's my take on it. And, that's why I agreed to do this, is because I respect Mowdy, and he's a thoughtful person, and
thank you, sir.
It is what it is, man. I have my opinions. I'm strong in my opinions. He has his, and he's strong in his opinions. And like I said, if we got a gig together, right now, it'd be all right, man. Let's go to work.
Well, that's good. That's what we wanted to create a platform for. And I know Mowdy used to do the meeting of the minds and things. He was always gracious to have me on a couple of times. And we want to do the same thing here. We want a calm, civil discourse. with low volume for the most part, and to allow a free exchange of ideas and to see how they sort of map out with one another and hopefully bring back kind of that peaceful dialogue, still disagreeing with one another, but certainly out of more of a context of consideration and compassion for the people we're speaking with. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. There was obviously a lot we could have unpacked. I hope we gave everybody something to chew on a little bit, a few little nuggets, hopefully to get the wheels spinning. But, feel free to leave comments at the bottom as we continue to post more and more programs for you. But I want to thank, obviously, Christopher for coming out, and I want to thank Philip for switch hitting there, contributing, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. As always, feel free to leave comments and suggestions in the comment box below for some show ideas that you would like to see debated or discussed. As always, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Remember, infinity is endless and progress is necessary. Until next time.